Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening, friends, depending on where you are. I'm Emily Windsor Craig, and this is History Reset. Where I am, it's 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on May the 4th, 23rd, 2020. History Reset is brought to you each Saturday to bring valuable information to the public that corporate media refuse to consider, let alone divulge. This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio and keep the people's truth coming at you without commercial adverts. It's not about money here. Now, warnings come up from time to time, and indigenous peoples tend to brush them off, and old souls know better. I'm going to be speaking generally about history today for a while, and I'm going to consider who exactly can we trust in terms of what we hear, what we are hearing, what we are being told in the memes and the brands and the pitches that come at us all the time. And not just from the mainstream media, but alternative media has their agenda, and the church has their agenda, and academia has their agenda. You know what I mean? And we, the people, are punked all the time because there's nobody talking to us about the true implications of events. And the leaders that we have all represent these different ideologies and different agendas, so that an overall summary of historical implications is missing. Now, in the past, we've all had history, and the wars were culture against culture. Okay, it was the reds against the blues, or the blacks against the whites, or you know what I'm talking about. But today, things have changed. We don't just have wars between cultures. We are now, because of the ability of maritime admiralty and corporate statutes to articulate behaviors and the outcomes of behaviors, now for almost the first time in history, we are able to parse and discern which behaviors cause good outcomes, which behaviors cause bad outcomes, and who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. Because the bad guys, if you look at the methods of the people who are causing the most disruptions, the bad guys are very consistent. They're not good one day and bad the next day. They consistently follow a pattern and method of tearing down the schools, tearing down the churches, tearing down civil liberties, you see what I'm saying? Okay? And so there are three broad crimes that are being carried on in the public domain that we see all the time, and that in some cases are justified by holy or sacred writings. And what are these three crimes that the bad guys are pursuing? Well, the first one is treachery. Treachery is, and we see this in politics all the time, an individual is voted into office or appointed into office, and their job is to stand for safety or stand for honesty or stand for good. And what we find is that they're doing something else, okay? They're doing exactly the opposite of what their job is. These are the cops that beat up people. These are the legislators who, in their public view, stand for the right or the law about ABC, but in their private behavior, they do the exact opposite. All right? These are treachery. You want to see treachery? Look at the coup against the current president by the FBI and the Department of Justice and all of the obstruction and obfuscating and blindness to the actual goings on behind the scenes. That is a perfect example of treachery, a coup d'etat, operating in secret. Where else does treachery operate? It operates in secret societies, of course, who take oaths. They take oaths to favor their own members. Okay, that's a protection racket. All right. But they also say that they stand for certain principles at the membership level, but higher up in the 33rd and the higher degrees, they have a different ethic. So that the brand of the organization is not the same as the behavior of the organization. See what I'm saying? And that's why, of course, we have all these think tanks that talk about how they promote democracy and how they promote common consent and how they promote the values of the people. But behind the scenes, what they're doing is financing radical acts by people who are not ethical. They're financing pay-to-play, offshore banking, money laundering. See what I'm saying? We are now able to see when an organization's mission is not its behavior, because we get to see the outcome. And we don't see the outcome in the mainstream media, of course, because the mission of the mainstream media is to bolster and support the establishment. And the establishment is built on how? It's built on protection rackets. What protection rackets? Well, you know, the mafia's put up a protection racket. It goes like this. You pay me and I won't attack you. Okay, that's a protection racket. Some protection rackets are slavery, bribery, pay to play. Human resource management is a protection racket because it levels the playing field to the point of prospective employees, to the point that only the politically correct people get hired. Okay, there's sorcery as a protection racket to protect the profits of big pharma. Slavery is a protection racket to create an income that's illegal. Revenue enhancement at the local law enforcement level is a protection racket. Offshore banking and hoarding capital. We live in a society where there are individuals who hoard billions upon tens of billions of dollars, and whole populations starving and sick and miserable and suffering, and that's okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. So those are the protection rackets. Now, the churches, all right, the Christian church doesn't have a doctrine that favors treachery, and neither does the Mosaic Law, but the Talmud does, and so does the Quran. In the Quran, treachery is called taqiyya, and a protection racket in the Quran is called jizya. And we all know that there are protection rackets within the churches because the situation in Italy has been going on for a long time with the protection rackets of the mafia that have actually saved some of the people's lives when they were in conflict against the empire. Okay, now you know I've talked about the empire before. In the ancient wars, it was this clan against that clan, this culture against that culture, you know, and everybody's kind of middle of the road, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But when the Babylonian culture, and it's very well articulated in Bishop Alexander Hislop's book, The Two Babylons. Babylonian culture was very developed, but it was also very cruel. In Babylonian culture, they sacrificed unwanted children, rebellious youth, and excess elders. They practiced temple prostitution, treachery, protection rackets, and divide and conquer, because they were conquering the peoples around. So they had to create the arguments to say that those people are less than we are, and so we deserve to conquer them and enslave them. That's another protection racket, is conquest. All right. So the empire came to us from Sumer, from Babylon, from Assyria, from Greece, from Rome, from Tartary. And in every case, its practices were treachery, protection rackets, and divide and conquer. And so the book of Revelation in the Bible talks about war as a manifestation of good versus evil, whereas in our histories, war has been this culture against that culture and this culture against that culture, has not aligned, has not been able to articulate or line things up to say, who are the good people who are doing no harm, who are being honest and truth-telling and decent and loyal, and what are some of the other virtues? Okay, who are the good people who are practicing the virtues? And who are the people who are wreaking havoc and causing harm and pollution and misery and suffering? Now, finally, we can slice and dice what happens in the news to get a sense of who's operating from methods that are positive, optimistic, useful, and helpful, and who's operating from methods that are destructive, demoralizing, defiling, and decadent. We can do that now. And this, in our history, is probably the first time that the mass of humanity, having so much information, infoglut, okay, can make this cut from New York City down to the smallest village in Vietnam or Indonesia or China. Everybody has the tools now to make this cut. Who are the people using good and who are the people using evil? So we are no longer just wandering in the desert, even because now we have the substance to put the flesh on the bones of the contradictions and the paradoxes and the disinfo and the misinfo and the double entendres. Okay, we can now put flesh on the bones. Where are the bad effects that are accruing? And who's doing them? And where are the good things that are happening? And who's doing those? And so we can see an alignment. The people who do the good thing, the right thing, and the people who are trying, because of an ideology, to overturn what is good. The ideology could be religious, it could be political, it could be personal. Satanism is personal. Luciferianism is ideological. But there are these ideologies that overturning and destroying humanity is what's going to help. Excuse me. I have made some of my own quinine. And I get the stuff caught in my throat, and it's really easy to make. Just at the organic grocery store, get 3 or 4 organic grapefruit and peel them and keep the juice, drink the juice, and then cut a quarter the peelings and put those in a pot with some clean filtered water and let it just simmer for a couple of hours and strain it off and put it in a jar, and you've got quinine. And it's very good for alkalizing the system, and it's got lots of vitamin C in it, and it helps my throat. Okay. So we're not wandering in the desert anymore. We now can see and assess and judge who are the people doing the good things, all right, or preventing the bad things. How about the people who are right now a judicial watch, who are trying very, very studiously and faithfully to challenge methods of rigging the election? Judicial Watch is challenging all kinds of jurisdictions and gerrymandered districts that have people on the rolls who are not legitimately on the voting records rolls. Okay, who wants to rig the election? I'll let you answer that question. I don't even have to go there. You and I know. You and I know. Okay. We have a problem with communicating to our children because our kids are on this all the time. And they're taught by their Common Core curriculum to pay more attention to their peers than they do to their parents. Not only that, the language and the terminology and the vocabulary that they're getting out of the Common Core curriculum doesn't make any sense to their parents, all right? And so there's this division having been set up between generations. And unless you really confront the issue of the cell phone and get the cell phone out of your kids' hands long enough to actually teach your child your own culture, your own origin, your own history, your own spiritual orientation or ethos, your child is going to be raised by his peers. Now, is that what you want? Okay. So that's one thing that we're stuck at home we can think about doing and getting organized to do. Some families have times when everybody's cell phone has to be in a certain place in a box on the table or something when we're having dinner. Think about that. We're going to have to set up new supply chains. You know, the empire coming through has always had the particular strategy of causing a plague in order to bring an end to the older generation and bring in something new. Okay, the Black Death in Europe during the Renaissance did that, and smallpox was a gift to the indigenous tribes in the New World in North America, so that the indigenous tribes could just disappear and not be bothering the people who wanted to take over. And of course, the bioweapons that are in use now, COVID-19 and SARS and HIV and Ebola, were all developed as a defense contract at Fort Detrick, Maryland, and then shipped out to various labs from there. And Judy Mikovits tells that story, and George Webb tells that story. Okay, that these bioweapons have been deliberately activated in an election year for the purpose of derailing the re-election of the current president. That's the simple intention of it. And so bioweapons have destroyed, the lockdown has destroyed basically all the mom and pop shops and just left the big corporations operating, so that culture, local culture, is just rubbed out, and what's left is corporations. So we have to create new supply chains. Lately, I have been seeing online farmers cooperatives that want to sell us meat and over online and ship it to us frozen, which sounds like a great idea if you have a freezer that can accommodate it. And if you don't, well, you're going to have to look around for a local farmer if the meat packing houses are to remain closed out of fear for the COVID-19 epidemic. And there may be other reasons why the large packing houses are deemed as expendable. We don't know. We don't know. But things are going to be harder to obtain, and they are going to jump in price 30 or 50 or 100%. And so we have to be a lot more judicious about how we use our money now. We have to think in terms of thrift. Running into the wilderness as a way of escape. All right. And that's what the Bible calls for. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by stakes, head for the mountains. Well, that would be all right if the mountains weren't burning, all right? And that would be all right if you are equipped, you're actually equipped to live there. I've been following the videos of a gentleman who, for the last 3 or 4 years, built his own log cabin on his property in Canada. Built the cabin, the porch, in all of the pieces and bits and pieces. And this year he's putting in a garden. And let me tell you, that is an enormous undertaking. And then 30 years from now, when he's in his 70s and can no longer hunt with the ease and no longer heft and carry the loads that he has to heft and carry, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, that cabin might very well be abandoned unless his children decide to do the same thing and live out in the middle of nowhere. So this is something we have to think about. Is there a way to escape the empire, the New World Order? Do we have to stand and face it as gentle people, the Essenes, and other gentle Pacific cultures? Have they stood and faced the empire and they got wiped out? Okay, we don't want to do that, all right? If you want to move out to the country, you better be experienced in dealing with and handling not only the supplies and the shelter and the weather, but also the animals. Have you noticed on YouTube how many farms are putting up videos about their relationships to their animals, the foaling and the deaths of the animals and the lives of the animals that we never had before? This is good for your kids to watch too. There's so much going on for the animal-minded, okay? And we've lost contact with those skills. We've lost contact with knitting and crocheting and making our own apparel, because apparel has been so cheap coming from Southeast Asia for so long now that we'd forgotten all of our skills. I've published 6 books of crochet patterns, but I don't think I've met a half a dozen women who have the time or the inclination to struggle through how to do the first row and the first pattern, okay? Those skills have almost been completely lost. I have all the bedspread patterns and the tablecloth patterns, a few of the doily patterns. I didn't find those interesting, but the altar linens and the pictures that you put up on the wall. But as you see, we are not allowed to have the time to pursue our own interests until we've put in 45 years of contributions to Social Security. And after those 45 years, we can finally go to work for ourselves. which is what I've done. And it works out pretty well. Um, there's a lot we can do if we feel well. And feeling well is one of the protection rackets we have to confront. The allopathic school of medicine, in which prescriptions, visits, procedures, and surgery are the only strategies or methods to maintain physical health, has only been in place since it was either Henry Ford or the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller, established medical associations and gave them all kinds of money and privileges to get them all under one canopy so they would all follow the same rules. It has been since John D. Rockefeller's institutes that chiropractors and acupuncturists and reflexologists. I know reflexology, I can do that. In fact, it's very helpful to me. And nutritionists, not just dietitians, but people who actually understand how food and herbs are the same thing. Food and herbs are the same thing. Quinine, which actually disables malaria, is just the boiled grapefruit peelings, okay? And garlic is an antibiotic. And a good blood thinner is cayenne pepper, honey. I mean, you learn about foods as controlling the body processes that you experience. And you don't go to a druggist and pay $50 or $100 for a little bottle of pills, because life comes from the living. Life doesn't come from the dead. So we have not only our health to struggle with, we have our diet and the supply chain for our food to struggle with, knowing that the official doctrine, the official story, the official dogma of USDA is that GMOs are fine, okay? The glyphosate, which basically dehydrates the grains that it's used on so that insects don't find the grains desirable. Well, glyphosate also dehydrates the body, and it can cause some of the same symptoms as microwaves cause, or that as 5G or 6G cause. It's all about pulmonary, an attack on the pulmonary system of the body, an attack on the lungs. We also have, our air quality boards across the country are not charged, are not told, they're not directed to test to see what the oxygen saturation of our air is, so we know if they have anything to breathe or not, okay? We're opposing and protecting ourselves against a hierarchy that's in the business of treachery, that's in the business of saying they're doing one thing for us, but in fact, they have something else in mind, okay? I talked to several air quality control offices, and when I asked them about, well, what about the oxygen saturation of the air? Well, we're not told to do anything about that. No, that we don't have to do that. We don't. But what are you doing? Okay, what are you doing? All right. So we can either run, maybe, emigrate, maybe, where, or we can stay put and confront issue after issue after issue after issue, one at a time. And the bioweapons plagues have been used by a class of, how does Dr. Stephen Greer label them? Unaccountable covert operations. They are set up as contracts by government agencies that as contracts have no accountability for their methods. All right. And so what we, the people, are left with are corporations operating from maritime admiralty corporate statutes in which there are no human rights, and they tell us that they're about one thing, but quite often they're about the opposite of what they're telling us. All right. Okay, so we deal with fraud, deceit, disinfo, and propaganda. How do we get safe? Well, the first thing about being safe is to let go of the panic. Okay, have you ever had a panic attack? It's when you feel like your heart's going to jump out of your body and you think, I'm suffocating. That's a panic attack. And what nurses suggest if you go to the ER with a panic attack is they give you a paper bag and they ask you to blow into the paper bag. Now, I don't use paper bags. I just do a lot of blowing when I notice that I'm getting kind of upset. I start blowing, and that brings the blood pressure back down. All right. We have to deal with the panic. When the panic drives us into behavior that harms other people or drives other people away, then that's the time to seek help with the panic. Seeking help with the panic is a good idea. Now, there are all kinds of counselors, there are all kinds of peer groups for dealing with panic, but you have to deal with panic as if it was a physical problem. One way to deal with panic is to prevent panic on the body. Okay, so you do the things that keep your body from getting stressed to such a maximum that you go over the maximum. You adopt practices, you adopt routines. Okay, some people running helps them to clear their mind. I used to have a rowing machine, and it was wonderful for clearing the mind. Music is wonderful for clearing the mind. Epic music. Oh, I'm finding epic music is marvelous for waking you up and getting you going. All right. And that's to have energy that's not based on either fear or hate. You know, people who are just terrified all the time, or they use their hatred against this or that, or this person or that issue as their source of energy to get through the day. That's something we have to confront. If we're always negative, you get a bad reputation. And, you know, for some years, I was very, very negative. And if you look on YouTube at my videos for Emily Elizabeth Windsor Craig, if you search Google, you'll find all the videos that I did out of fear and anger. All right. And that's one of the reasons I had to change my name on YouTube to Shakaya, because I realized that that wasn't the way to go. Being always in a snit doesn't really do any good. We have to confront our fears in a civil way. We have to confront the people who oppose us in a civil way. We have to confront the people who hate us in a civil way. And sometimes our best argument is silence, because the person we're confronting is not going to listen to anything that we have to say. And this is going to be the kind of the wrap up for today, and it has to do with confronting the silence of non-accountability in the public domain. Over 30 odd years, I've written to legislators and judges and officials and professionals and business. I've written and written and written and written. And in that time, the percentage of things that I write that actually get a return has been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until now. I don't even expect a return because I realize that being sequestered into an ideology, when somebody confronts your ideology, you don't have an answer. Okay, so expecting a response or a reply on a tweet is just unrealistic. But when you call one of your kids because you have a problem, you expect that they are going to return the phone call. When you call your mom, you expect she'll return the phone call. When you call the next door neighbor to inform them about something going on, you expect them, if you have to leave an answering machine, a word on the answering machine, that they'll get back to you. Okay, that makes sense. And those are always forthcoming. But what about if you write to the pastor or priest or reverend of your church? Can you expect an answer from them? Well, I think it probably has to do with whether you write to them as an individual or you write to them as a representative of the organization. And so if we don't frame our proposition, let's put it that way, in a friendly and personal way, it doesn't get an answer. Okay, so who else do we have to deal with in the public sphere? In the public sphere, we have the internet, and there are places like Reddit and Facebook where we just let it all hang out. And if we don't get banned, now for years I was banned because I didn't understand the rules. If you don't understand the rules, that's why you get banned. But there are people you want to address and talk to and discuss something with. Can you frame something personally to that person that will get you the kind of response you want? It's getting trickier and trickier to do that. And the temptation on the part of, I look at my emails in the morning. There are usually around 200 of them in the morning. First of all, I look for anything personal. And when I get an email that's framed in a very typical, mimicky way, I just put it aside. One of the skills that will help us get to the future is to sharpen the ability we have to identify with people personally and to make them happy that they communicated with us. And that's one of the things we can do here at YouTube or Facebook. But it's also one of the characteristics we see of the people who are doing harm, that they never answer. The people who are doing harm, you can write to them till the cows come home. You can put it in the nicest possible way, and they will never answer you. That's one of the characteristics that we can pin on the people who are trying to punk us. They're punking us in medicine, they're punking us in our history, they're punking us in science, because what gets paid, what gets funded in science is what is politically advantageous. We're getting punked just about every place. And I'm hoping that you won't feel that I am punking you here. Either that, or that I'm trying to discourage you from getting in there into the struggle to learn the truth and figure out how things work so you can plan a future for yourself and your family. That's the struggle. Okay, if we don't know what's true, how can we plan? And if we allow ourselves to be gaslit and punked and put off and held at bay by the people who are doing harm, we're not going to have a future either. Now, how do we talk about the harm that we are seeing so that we can call the people who are doing harm to accountability? That's a challenge that's met with some simple skills, okay? One is a listening skill that I learned some years ago in communication. It's called an iMessage, all right? And it makes personal an event that just happened so that you can discuss it with somebody who was either involved or not involved, okay? You can say to somebody, when you do this or when this happens, its effect on me is that I blank, 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 okay? And if it continues, the effect will be such and such and so on. And it will leave me in a position where I'm going to have to decide A or B or C. You see, you've laid out your discussion in terms of facts and not in terms of preferences and not in terms of character. You're a no good Nick or you're this and I'm a that. No, 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 no. When this happens or when you do this, what happens to me is A, B, and C. And if that continues, what will happen is D, E, and F. And in that case, I'm going to have to look at options G, H, and I. Okay. That kind of communication does work. And you do get an answer. So today, I hope that I kind of summarized where we are in the deluge and the info glut of contradictions and paradoxes, okay? And what we're going to look for from now on are the laws of cause and effect and how the causes and the effects create outcomes that we can have opinions about, to discuss behaviorally and in terms of cause and effect, and not in terms of ideology, not in terms of character, not in terms of personality, or I'm righter than you and we're righter than them. Just trying to be helpful. So that's it for today. I'm a little short, but that's okay. I don't want to bore you all. This has been Emily Craig, and we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Guess what?
What?
I didn't hit the startup button on Facebook.
Uh-oh.
So what I have is what I've given you.
I've got the recording for it.
I don't want to take it any further anyway because...
I've got the recording for it if you want it, so...
let's see.
It's just the MP3.
It's just an MP3. I need an MP4. Could I send you a couple of pictures?
Well, sure, but don't you have something you can make an MP4 with?
No, I don't.
You don't have Movie Maker anymore, or?
My Movie Maker on Windows 10 does not work.
No. Yeah, you can send me a few pictures.
I'll send you a few pictures. Cool. All right. And that's really hysterical that I never hit the button. Duh. Well, I thought I did.
It happens.
Right. So I'll just put our MP4 up on Facebook when we get it, and that'll be fine. That'll work.
Okay. Say goodnight to everyone.
I said what needed to be said. And now, do you have somebody to take over the rest of the time?
Yes.